January 1950, Naples, Italy. The morning air was quiet, almost peaceful. Lucky Luciano stood near a window in his safe house, looking out at the street below. He had been living in Italy since 1946, forced out of the United States by the government, officially removed from the country he once controlled from the shadows. But distance had not weakened his influence. It had only changed the way he ruled. Even in exile, Lucky Luciano remained connected. Messages crossed oceans. Phone calls were arranged through secure lines. Trusted men reported everything that mattered. New York was still his heartbeat, even if his body was thousands of miles away. That morning, the call came early. The voice on the other end belonged to a man Lucky knew very well. Vito Genovese. Ambitious, sharp, dangerous, and impatient. "Charlie," Vito said, using Lucky's old street name, "we have a problem in New York." Lucky said nothing. He listened. "Harlem," Vito continued. "It's making millions. Numbers, policy, protection, and none of that money comes to us." Lucky closed his eyes for a moment. He already knew where this conversation was going. "Bumpy Johnson," Vito said. "He runs everything up there. No tribute, no permission, nothing." Lucky answered slowly. "We had an understanding." "That understanding is 20 years old," Vito replied. "Times have changed." Lucky opened his eyes again and stared out the window. He remembered Harlem. He remembered Bumpy Johnson clearly. Small man, sharp mind, calm presence. A man who did not talk loudly, but was always heard. "Bumpy hasn't changed," Lucky said. "That's the problem," Vito replied. "He thinks he's untouchable." Lucky remained silent. Silence was his way of thinking. From New York, Vito kept pushing. Harlem. The five men checked into a midtown hotel, believing it was smart to stay outside Harlem. They thought distance would hide them. But even that first move was noticed. A hotel porter watched them arrive. He noticed their accents, their confidence, the way they scanned the lobby instead of relaxing. He had seen men like them before. That night, he made a phone call. "Mr. Johnson," he said quietly, "5 out-of-towners just checked in, asking about Harlem." Bumpy Johnson listened, thanked him, and hung up. Then he made another call. "Illinois," he said, "I need you to watch 5 men, Chicago types. I want to know everywhere they go." Illinois Gordon said nothing more than, "Yes, boss." For 3 days, Illinois followed them. He watched them walk the streets of Harlem. He watched them speak to small dealers. He watched them take notes. He watched them smile. They never noticed him. On the 4th day, Illinois reported back. "They're setting up policy banks," he said. 3 locations. They've already recruited locals." Bumpy nodded slowly. "Do they know we're watching?" he asked. "No," Illinois said. "They think they're safe." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said. "Let them work." Bumpy Johnson did not act out of anger. He acted out of calculation. He knew that if he stopped them too early, they would simply send more men. He wanted them committed, comfortable, exposed. February 14th, 1950, Valentine's Day. The first policy bank opened on 125th Street. A clean storefront, a friendly front, numbers running in the back. Business started small but steady. The 5 men felt confident. That night, Bumpy called a meeting at Small's Paradise. 20 men sat around him, men he trusted with his life. "We have visitors," Bumpy said calmly. "5 out of town." February 18th, 1950. Harlem woke up like it always did. Shops opened, music drifted from doorways. People went to work. On the surface, nothing looked different. But beneath that normal rhythm, something final had already happened. The 5 men who had come to Harlem to build operations never returned to their hotel rooms. Their bags stayed untouched. Their contacts waited for calls that never came. By midday, people who knew how to read silence understood that something was wrong. Inside the warehouse near the docks, Bumpy Johnson's men worked quietly. There was no shouting, no chaos. Everything was controlled. Bumpy believed that disorder brought attention, and attention brought problems. He wanted this finished cleanly. The 5 men were kept apart after the initial confrontation. They were given water. One of them asked for mercy. Another tried to bargain, promising money, protection, information. Bumpy listened without anger. He had heard it all before. He knew something they did not. This decision was not about them as individuals. It was about preventing the next group from coming. Late that night, it ended. The men were killed quickly. No unnecessary pain, no spectacle. Bumpy did not stay to watch. He believed there was no honor in cruelty. The work was done because it had to be done, not because it felt good. Afterward, the bodies were prepared. Identification was important. Bumpy wanted there to be no doubt about who these men were or where they came from. Personal items were kept intact: rings, watches, small details that told a story without words. By February 19th, the packages were ready. They were not sent randomly. Each one had a purpose. Each one was meant to be recognized immediately by the people who received them. The message did not need a letter. It did not need explanation. In that world, understanding came fast. Early on February 20th, 1950, a delivery arrived at Vito Genovese's home. 5 packages. Heavy, silent. Genovese opened the first one and felt his stomach drop. He did not open the others right away. He already knew. He recognized the ring, the watch, the proof. The anger came next. He slammed doors. He shouted. He cursed Bumpy Johnson. He cursed Harlem. He cursed the men who had failed him. But anger could not change reality. He called Frank Costello. "They're dead," Vito said. "All of them." Costello said nothing at first. "And Bumpy made sure we'd know," Vito continued. "He sent them back." Costello understood immediately what this meant. This was not just revenge. This was a boundary. Within hours, Costello was on a secure line with Naples. Lucky Luciano answered quickly. "They're dead," Costello said. Lucky did not ask how. He already knew the answer. "Bumpy?" Lucky asked. "Yes." There was a long silence. Then Costello spoke again. "Charlie?" There was a note. Lucky closed his eyes. "What did it say?" "One word," Costello replied. "Harlem." Lucky felt the weight of it settle in his chest. He had underestimated the situation. Not Bumpy's capability, he had never doubted that, but the seriousness of the move. Allowing men to go into Harlem without direct negotiation had been a mistake. "Get Genovese on the line," Lucky said quietly. When Vito came on, his voice was sharp with anger. "They were my men," Vito said. "Our men." "And they went somewhere they didn't belong," Lucky replied. "So we just accept this?" Vito snapped. "We let him kill 5 of our people?" "Yes," Lucky said calmly. "That's exactly what we do." Vito was stunned. "You're afraid of him." "I respect him," Lucky said. "There's a difference." Lucky explained what Vito did not want to hear. Harlem was not just territory. It was Bumpy's base, his home, his network. Going to war there would drain money, men, and attention. It would bring heat they could not control. "Those 5 men died sending us a message," Lucky said, "and it's a message we need to hear." Vito argued. He threatened retaliation. He spoke about pride, about weakness, about precedent. Lucky cut him off. "You broke an understanding that existed for decades," he said. He reminded us why that understanding existed. "If you're smart, you'll listen." The line went quiet. Finally, Vito spoke again, colder now. "So Harlem is off limits?" "Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." The call ended. In New York, the story spread fast. Not the details. Those stayed vague, but the result. 5 men went into Harlem. 5 packages came back. People whispered the story in clubs, in back rooms, in cars parked on dark streets. The details changed with each telling, but the meaning stayed the same. Do not cross Harlem. Do not test Bumpy Johnson. Do not assume distance makes you safe. For Bumpy, the days that followed were quiet. He returned to his routines. He met with local leaders. He made sure the neighborhood stayed calm. He did not brag. He did not explain. His silence was louder than any speech. People in Harlem felt protected. They knew something big had happened, even if they didn't know all of it. Outsiders stopped asking questions. Unknown faces disappeared. The balance had shifted. Lucky Luciano, sitting in Italy, adjusted his thinking. He had built his empire on structure and rules, but this incident reminded him that local power mattered just as much as organizational power. Systems worked best when they respected realities on the ground. Bumpy Johnson had proven something important. Independence could survive if it was defended decisively. And the cost of underestimating that independence was absolute. March 1950. The shock settled into something colder and more permanent. In the weeks after the deliveries, the city adjusted. Deals were redrawn. Routes were reconsidered. Men who liked to test boundaries decided it was smarter to ask before stepping. Harlem stayed quiet, not because it was weak, but because it had made itself expensive to challenge. Lucky Luciano spent long nights thinking from Naples. Exile had taught him patience, but it had also taught him humility. Power, he realized again, was not just about orders traveling through wires and whispers. It was about where a man stood when things went wrong. He could guide, approve, and correct from afar, but he could not feel the neighborhood the way Bumpy did. That mattered. It changed calculations. Luciano did what smart leaders do after a costly lesson. He adjusted. He reinforced the old understanding. Harlem would remain independent. Business would be done around it, not through it. He spoke quietly to his lieutenants, reminding them that expansion without respect was not expansion, it was provocation. Vito Genovese carried the incident like a wound that never fully healed. Publicly, he obeyed. Privately, he remembered. Pride does not disappear easily, and humiliation lingers. But even he understood the truth. War in Harlem would be unwinnable. The cost would be endless, the attention unbearable. He turned his ambitions elsewhere, choosing ground where resistance was thinner and loyalties could be purchased rather than earned over decades. In Harlem, Bumpy Johnson continued as he always had. He kept his numbers operation steady. He made sure businesses felt protected. He paid his people fairly and expected discipline in return. He did not punish without reason. He did not show cruelty for sport. Those who worked with him understood the rules clearly, and those who didn't learned quickly. Outsiders stopped drifting in with proposals that ignored the neighborhood's leadership. When deals were proposed, they were proposed properly, with introductions, payments, and respect. The story of the 5 packages hardened into legend. Details blurred, but the core never changed. 5 men went in, 5 packages came back. The legend did its work. It traveled faster than truth and lasted longer than fear. Young men learned it as a warning. Old men told it as confirmation that certain methods still worked. It became shorthand for a lesson everyone understood. Do not mistake patience for weakness, and do not confuse quiet with surrender. As the years passed, the city's underworld evolved. Law enforcement pressure increased. Technology changed how money moved. Alliances shifted. But the boundary drawn in 1950 held. Harlem remained different. It was not untouched by crime, but it was governed locally, shaped by relationships that outsiders could not replicate quickly. That difference protected it more effectively than walls ever could. When Bumpy Johnson later spoke to associates about that winter, he did not dramatize it. He described it as necessary. If he had allowed the 5 men to leave alive, he said, 10 more would have arrived, then 100, then Harlem would have been swallowed. He chose a final answer to prevent a long war. It was a grim logic, but it was consistent with the world he lived in. He believed demonstrations ended arguments faster than speeches. Lucky Luciano understood that logic. From Italy, he respected it. He never tested Harlem again. He never pretended the lesson had not been learned. He focused on keeping his system intact, knowing that systems endure when they adapt rather than insist. His influence faded slowly, but the structure he built outlived him, precisely because it learned when to stop pushing. By the late 1960s, when Bumpy Johnson's name appeared in headlines for the last time, people remembered the winter of 1950 as proof of who he had been. Not loud, not reckless, decisive. A man who knew when to talk and when to demonstrate. A man who understood that reputation, once established, could do the work of armies. History rarely records the quiet calculations behind decisive moments. It remembers the outcomes. In this case, the outcome was simple and enduring. Harlem remained Harlem. The families stayed out. And a single delivery, 5 heavy packages placed where they would be seen, rewrote the rules without a war. The lesson echoed beyond that decade. Power that ignores local truth breaks itself. Authority that listens survives. In a city built on deals and consequences, Bumpy Johnson chose consequence once so he would not have to choose it again. Lucky Luciano, watching from afar, accepted the boundary and preserved the larger piece, and everyone else learned to read the signs. In the end, no speeches were made, no claims were filed, no apologies were offered. There was only understanding, and in that world, understanding was the most valuable currency of all.